Hey guys, many times I get asked the question of how to handle micromanagement. Um, there's a lot of ways to approach this question, but I want to really kind of address the heart of it. I think it's super important for us to understand that the question is deeper than the surface, right? We can address micromanagement with the boss and how to talk to the boss and different things like that, but the reality is this isn't a question coming from the head. This is a question coming from the heart. You're feeling micromanaged, and you might not even be able to put a pin on exactly how, but you're feeling it. Where does that feeling come from? That's where I think the source of the question comes. And of course, we'll dive into the other stuff in a bit, but I want to lean in and really kind of push towards the source of the problem, and that's trust. Um, Most people will tell you that if you ask some follow-on questions, that there's a trust issue with their manager, and that drives two things. Number one, it drives them into pushing you to do your work at a deeper level or checking in on you or things like that, the things you are feeling that are micromanagement. And it drives you to react to it in a way that is frustrated. I feel like I'm being micromanaged. So I think that there's the issue of trust that you need to consider first. These most often happens with new relationships across the board. So if you've got a new manager, it's supernatural, not supernatural, but supernatural to all of a sudden have a trust issue because your manager doesn't know you. You don't know him. You don't know the way they work. And they don't know the way you work. So they're diving in. Okay. Now you got to understand that some of that is expected, right? They need to know that you're doing your job. Some of it is unwarranted. I know that when I was a senior engineer on a project at one point in time, we got a new lead, and he had a problem with both senior engineers, and he and my other associate and I kind of collaborated and knew exactly what was going on. And so there was a level of micromanagement there that was unwarranted. So, but I think that it came down to trust, and you've got to bite through that problem first. Vulnerability is a big aspect of dealing with trust. Patrick Lencioni dives into this deeply in the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So, recommend that you get that book. Recommend that you read through it, at least the sections on trust, which is the foundational part of his whole structure. And maybe there's an opportunity to kind of give it to everybody on the team to work through these issues. Step level meetings are an important aspect. This is something that also can risk trust, but if you're careful, you can have a conversation with their boss to find out how to best connect and engage in that. But leading up is probably the best scenario, and that is becoming vulnerable yourself, engaging in a conversation, getting to know who they are, and getting to a point where you can confidently say to them, look, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. If you have a problem with that, let's talk through it. But I wouldn't expect that you need to hear from me more than this amount of times, right? Maybe you have a daily stand-up meeting, and that should suffice, by the way. Or maybe you have a weekly operational meeting. But all of those things that you put in place should suffice if your trust is there. But trust requires vulnerability, and so I really recommend that you dive in on that part of things. Getting to the micromanagement level is a different problem, but I'll even say that micromanagement isn't necessarily a bad thing, and sometimes it can be necessary, right? When you're training someone, when you're bringing someone up in a very skilled oriented job, you have to micromanage them to make sure that the job gets done right. So there are times where a level of micromanagement is needed. But if you're complaining or if you're concerned about micromanagement, the likelihood it's a deeper question, it's from the heart, and that it is a trust issue that you need to dive into and get to. So lead up and become vulnerable. It's a super important thing. That brings us to the value that you can represent with this, and that is openness. Openness, transparency, all of those things. If you core that as a value of yourself, then this is when it happens, and this is the part of it where you've got to make it happen or be accountable to the effects of it. So we'll talk to you later. Thanks so much. Have a great